Friday the 26th of April. It's Earth Week. This is the Climate Alarm Clock. This week's headlines: is there a backlash against climate action? As countries and companies back out of climate pledges, will the EU be next? But no evidence of a backlash among the Irish public. New poll research suggests Irish people still want climate action. And in good news, California runs on renewables for 30 of the last 38 days. Hello and welcome to the Climate Alarm Clock, your Irish climate news podcast. I'm Dara Wynne and we're into our second episode of season 6 and delighted to be joined as always by Ciara Daly and Anna Pringle. How are you both doing?
Good morning, Dara. All good?
Yeah, all good here in County Galway. Surviving and thriving. I actually went for such a nice walk this morning and I was just so grateful to be alive. Birds singing, naturing.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Well, while you were doing that, I was putting the bins out, so there you go. Not quite as bucolic.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, Anna. Come on, you're embarrassing us.
It was a green and brown bin in my defence.
You're back in the podcast. How are you, Dazla?
Good. Yeah. Definitely enjoying the slightly better weather and like that, getting out into nature a bit. I was down in Abbey Leaks Bog on Sunday, which is
lovely.
Absolutely
steel and turf.
Right. Just before we get into our stories, a reminder that if you want to support the work that we do, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com/the climate alarm. And I think we had someone buy us a coffee this week, Anna.
We did. Our number one fan, Kevin, thank you so much. He's welcoming us back, so I'm glad somebody is glad that we're back. So thanks for that, Kevin. Because we're obviously glad we're back as well.
I know. I think at least 3 people are glad we're back. I know, but thanks to Kevin, who also sent on a story to us through Twitter this week as well. Which I thought you knew that because we're going to discuss it. So just great minds think alike then.
Very good.
Okay, so going on to our first story then. This is kind of a couple of stories that we've meshed together about Scotland and the company Unilever. Both announced a rollback on their environment and climate pledges in the last couple of weeks, and there's some debate as to whether the Green Deal in Europe could be next. So to start with Scotland announced that they are abandoning their target of 75% emissions reductions by 2030. So the decision comes after the UK Climate Change Committee says it wasn't a credible target, and I suppose rather than improve policy to reach that target, Scotland have just abandoned it. So like the rest of the UK, they're still committed to net zero by 2045. But they're probably going to adopt 5-year carbon budgets instead. So kind of outline how much carbon they can use for the next in 5-year periods, which is what the rest of the UK does. So that's what it's likely they're going to replace this 75% target with.
So you've led there with their abandoning their targets, but are they actually abandoning them, or are they just changing their adapting a more pragmatic approach?
So they haven't announced what they're going to replace it with yet. Speculation is that it's going to be these 5-year carbon targets. And there was one commentator, it might have been someone from the Climate Change Committee, who said it's really dangerous this next kind of few months or year while they've abandoned this target and haven't put anything else in place.
So they've basically just taken out, they've said the targets are too hard, we're not going to meet them, so we don't have a target right now.
Yeah.
Other than the far off 2045 target.
Yeah. So in terms of are they just being pragmatic, Ciara, I think how can you be pragmatic in it
in a crisis?
Yeah, what do you mean by are they being economically pragmatic, or are they being pragmatic in that we don't want to make the hard decisions? They're definitely not being pragmatic in this is a better way to achieve less climate breakdown. And I think that is kind of that's exactly the question that this story brings up.
Well, I mean, that word pragmatic is just another form of delay, if you ask me. And there was actually a pretty good opinion piece in the Financial Times this week saying, beware of pragmatism. And so people are calling themselves pragmatic. And she's saying they should actually be called hot earthers, not pragmatists. Because it's a way of just softening opposition to fossil fuels and opposition to emissions reduction. And they've been called energy pragmatists. So I bet the fossil fuel companies love that label because, everybody wants to be pragmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
that's...
for the targets, I just want to get in the targets themselves. What kind of change, what kind of targets did they have, and what kind of, we don't know what the changes they're making yet, are they? Do we know that yet?
Yeah, they haven't announced yet.
Okay. Do you know what, do you guys, you two know what the targets originally were? Like, they were pretty ambitious, isn't that fair to say?
Yeah, they were looking for a 75% reduction, I believe, in their emissions by 2030.
So that's across all sectors.
Yeah, so it's a very ambitious target. Here in Ireland, we are looking for, I believe, a 55% reduction by 2030 of 2019 baseline, which is also a very ambitious target that right now we are nowhere close to meeting. But I mean, you have a choice. You can either say, well, it's a really ambitious target, but let's try really hard to get as close to it as possible.
Yeah.
Or you can say, yeah, no, I think that's too hard. Let's not do it.
And I think that's kind of what I think this story comes down to, is that at the time when Scotland announced this, there was huge praise. I think it was 2019 when they announced this target, so quite early on. Huge praise from Friends of the Earth Scotland. Loads of people were proud that Scotland were kind of leaders in the field of climate action. And what's really important to note is that targets like that are proportionate to the scale of the crisis. They are the levels of reductions that we need to have any chance of having kind of a safe, livable future. Also taking into the account that developed countries should be doing more.
Right.
Like countries who have emitted the most historically have the biggest obligation to reduce their emissions. So that is a proportionate target. And now it's just kind of like saying, yeah, it's hard and we don't really know how to get there, so we're just not going to do it. And I suppose for me, I wonder, did they realize what they were signing up to? Like, did they actually understand what 80% meant when they announced it? Or is it just that it's too hard? We're not up for this fight. But I think this is kind of a big announcement because it's the first country that's kind of admitted we're not going to do this, and rather than like apologize or double down, they're just like, yeah, we're abandoning the target.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they're saying things like, the current target system is flawed and it's focusing too much on targets and not enough on policies. But the point is that policies are not results, and you have to focus on results. And like as we talked about last week, the cost of inaction is so much higher than the cost of hitting these targets.
Yeah.
But our energy pragmatists are not up for those challenges, it looks like.
Yeah, and we might kind of get into that a little bit later when we talk about that survey. I suppose similarly announced then Unilever, who were seen as a kind of leader in environmental action in the corporate world with huge announcements, are also rung back in their pledges. So they're one of the largest users of plastic packaging in the world, and they promised to halve their use of virgin plastics by 2025. And instead, they're now aiming for a reduction of a third by 2026. So that's 100,000 more tons of fresh plastic every year. And they've also gone back on their pledge to pay direct suppliers a living wage by 2030, instead proposing fair pay for suppliers accounting for half its annual spends on goods and services. It dropped.
So wait, so fair pay could be less than a living wage?
I guess
That's-
so.
that
Yeah, I guess
doesn't sound very fair to me.
It's a more ambiguous term. And it also dropped a promise to spend €2 billion with diverse businesses and a commitment that 5% of its workforce will be made up of people with disabilities. And yeah, so once again, a company that got loads of credit, got loads of headlines and positive press for these announcements, and probably less, there's less of a fanfare about the fact that they've abandoned these targets. So was it just kind of clever marketing on their part? Was it just like, oh, we're going to portray ourselves as green, and then we're going to slyly not do any of the things that we said that we'd done, and we'll hope that like a good few people hear about our good announcement and not too many people hear about the fact that we're not doing any of it. And the comments from
It's very cynical of you, Dara, to suggest that they were, explicitly greenwashing when they announced the targets. I'm sure they were well-intentioned and well-meaning, but things
I'm
changed
going to
along the
step
way.
in on behalf of Unilever, because I think actually there is a lot of people that work in that company that are genuinely like ambitious about those targets and are genuinely committed to them. Like Unilever is a huge organization. I don't think everybody that's making those commitments is like, let's pull the wool over their eyes. Like actually what I was trying to look at, and it kind of relates back to even the story in the Scottish government as well, is like, I remember we went to that climate camp and there was some woman giving a talk, that's really a brilliant woman giving a talk about, whenever there's something like this going on, follow the money. And I was trying to find, I don't understand the political landscape in Ireland, so I definitely don't understand the political landscape in Scotland. But I suppose with business, I can understand a little bit more. But in that article from The Guardian, it was talking about how a huge kind of reason this kind of abandoning of targets and ambitious goals is because pressure has been coming from shareholders who, no surprise, are banks, oil companies, the usual suspects. So like, I think it's important to actually acknowledge that those people, business, a company like Unilever is an it's a huge conglomerate. And I don't doubt that there is an element of greenwashing in, some of the communications that have come from them. But I also don't think it's fair to say that like, oh, of course they were just like, I think you kind of have to accept the nuance behind it, and also just kind of shine the light on the fact that, I suppose what I'm getting at is, even for the Scottish element of abandoning their targets, what's the pressure on them? Like, what are the actual realities of the complicated relationships that they're trying to navigate? For Unilever, it's a little bit more clear cut. You can you can see pretty transparently that it's financial pressures from banks and oil companies. Let's squeeze as much profit out of these businesses that we can, at the expense of other people.
And at the expense of the planet. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
I don't think what you're saying, and you're like, in fairness to them, and I'm like, totally not a valid excuse. That's kind of my, I'd read what you're saying and just be like, it is a
I suppose what I'm getting at, there's a politics in there. It's not that they're just like, okay,
it's
shareholders,
all,
we're not going to listen
politics.
to you.
Yeah, it's absolutely all politics. But that doesn't make it any less disgraceful, though.
No, the point is it's all connected. So plastics are an oil and gas byproduct. They are a product of the petroleum industry. And we tend to forget that because we don't, you don't look at your plastic bottle and go, oh, that came from oil, but it did. And plastics have been pushed by the oil and gas industry as a growth market for them for years now. And that's why the world is awash in plastic. And to your point, Ciara, there's probably, I don't know how many people work for Unilever. Maybe it's 100,000 people around the world. And absolutely, they are all, I'm sure, lots of decent people working for them. But it's not the 100,000 people that are making that decision. It's the executive team that have made that decision, most likely under pressure from investors. And as you say, they are big financial, they are oil and gas, whatever. But it's part of a bigger backlash that we're seeing as well, where we had some big investment firms like BlackRock, for example, which is one of the biggest investment companies in the world. A few years ago, they came out with, everything has to be sustainable, climate change, blah, blah. They are rowing back now and saying, well, actually, no, we're all about profit. And that's partly because of political pressure in places like Texas that relies on the oil and gas industry. And it's just because of inertia in the system as well. But it's also because the changes that have to be made are hard and difficult and need to change everything about how we live and what we do. And Unilever is a global consumer goods business, so they're in the business of selling consumer goods. So of course they're going to have challenges with this.
The thing that made me really, really, really cynical about it is the CEO of Unilever, when he was talking about this announcement, said people's focus on environmental and social issues are cyclical.
It's cyclical. Yeah, cyclical.
So it's
you
literally
mean like the stock market.
Yeah, we're just following that trend, and now people
Yeah.
don't care about it anymore. So we definitely don't care about it, especially if you can make bags more profit and not pay people a living wage.
And
so,
on their website landing page about our company, our strategy and growth action plan, our purpose is to make sustainable living commonplace, but just not with our products.
Yeah.
But then that's why we come to work. It's why we're in business. But it's not. Clearly, it's not. So that's not an honest statement in the context of what they're talking about.
When you hear these big announcements, be it a country pledging like an 80% pledge or a company pledging huge environmental changes and progress, the tendency for the general public is to hear those things and be like, right, it really sounds like these people have got it under control. It really sounds like these people have got it sorted. It really sounds like these people really care and have really got our backs. And as I said, the big headline announcements of these changes always get so much more coverage than the announcements that they're backing out of them. And if you think of what that does to the public perception of where people think climate action is at versus where it's actually at, that is incredibly dangerous and damaging, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually reading Heinz Schumacher's Unilever CEO. He published, and this is where this news came from, on the 19th of April, he published A New Era for Sustainability Leadership, defining a new era. And I am scrolling down this page to find out there is nothing in here about why they are reducing anything. They want to be more systemic. They want to take more urgent action. They are going to focus on climate, nature, plastics, and livelihoods. So, Dara, why should I believe you when you tell me that they're going to reduce plastics, or they're not going to meet their plastic targets, and they're not going to be for a fair living standards?
No, it's well.
I mean, you have to really dig deep to get to really what they're talking about here, because it's so covered in corporate PR speak.
Well, all I'm saying is we started talking about Bernard Looney 2 seasons ago, and Bernard Looney's no longer the CEO of BP. So Heinz Schumacher,
watch out! And he looks kind of smiley, and he's got an open neck shirt, so he's cool guy.
Kira. I'm gonna Google him.
Yeah,
it's a ride.
He's no Bernard though. Kira, just to be clear.
I suppose the point that I'm getting at with you guys is what you said.
Just give capitalism one more chance.
Try again, Kira. Go on, convince us.
What I'm getting at is you guys know all of that, right? What you just said, your big rant, which I totally agree with, but I'd never be able to reel off all of the reasons why you've qualified what your broad statement about Unilever was. If I don't have all of that knowledge, I just hear, oh, the world is fucked, for want of a better description. And what you were saying, the despondency you feel, Dara, when you see somebody set this really ambitious target and you're like, woohoo! And then they reel it back and you're like, ah! And that's a very good dramatic version, and I'm available for hire if anyone wants to star in a movie. But that despondency, what is the point I'm trying to make? Give me a second. What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to be careful of us using really broad statements like that and talking around the story, but not going into the nuance of it. Because I think when we go back to the Scottish situation of the Scottish government, you know, we're obviously seeing kind of parallels of what happens here in Ireland. We talk the talk, but we don't ever walk the walk. But there is that kind of nuance that happens within. I suppose it's that thing. I'm trying to avoid people getting too despondent about the whole situation, because there is, underneath the umbrella of, you know, bad actors, there are people who are trying to change things. Whether that's the right way they're doing it or not, I don't know. But I suppose it's just that protecting that kind of people from falling into that pit of like, there's just absolutely nothing I can do, and instead getting into the conversation of all the nuance that's happening around it, so that people kind of get through the weeds and figure out what the situation is, because there's a motivation behind confusing people. And I suppose it's like, how do you get into the weeds and figure out who the people are influencing that distraction, so that people feel despondent.
Yeah, and look, I think in Scotland, I mean, what a lot of the analysis is saying is that they were very ambitious, but they're not going to hit the target, and they have legally binding reasons where they have to step back and reduce their target. So you could argue, and it comes back to the pragmatist realist point, you could argue that they are being realistic and that makes sense. So, but having those targets without having real action to underpin them is a big problem and a big challenge for everybody.
Yeah, well, I suppose the point I'm making is, you can argue that they're being pragmatic if you understand how the inner workings of the government works, how politics works, but most people don't really. You know, we all have an opinion, but a lot of people don't really have an educated opinion. Like, I will have opinions on politicians. Sure, I don't know what they're at. Like, I take my lead from ye, whereas I need to actually understand more the inner workings of it to actually make informed decisions, and not just take all of my political views of you and that.
And I think that's a good place to get your political views, Ciara, to be fair. Definitely better than some of the other places you could be getting them these days.
So I think Friends of the Earth Scotland kind of called out the reason that this target was abandoned now is because of what they haven't done in the last kind of few years. So the head of campaigns for Friends of the Earth Scotland said that instead of using the past decade to deliver warm homes, reliable public transport, and a fair transition away from fossil fuels, inept short-term politicians have kept millions of people trapped in the broken status quo that only benefits big polluters. So it's not like something that happened today or last week or last year that caused them to abandon the target. It's the lack of inaction since they set up the target.
Yeah.
And I think that's really linked to what this fella Schumacher is saying about people's focus on environmental and social issues is cyclical. And to be honest, that's been getting me down the last while, because I kind of feel like the interest has gone. You know, that it's not kind of being talked about as much. And we were talking last week about the group chat podcast and how they were talking about the wet weather 2 weeks in a row and didn't mention climate once. And I was like, maybe people don't care about this anymore. But there was a Friends of the Earth survey out this week. And that sounds like people really do still care.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming back. That comes back to Ireland, and so Friends of the Earth did an Ireland Thinks poll, looking at what people's opinions are. So, I mean, I do think what we're talking about here is a backlash against climate action, and I think we're seeing that. And it's to Ciara's point earlier, a very orchestrated backlash by big oil and gas in particular. But in Ireland, I mean, the headline from the poll was, there's no sign of a climate backlash in Irish public opinion. But I think when we delve into it, there's maybe some signs. But, an absolute majority of people in Ireland, 56%, are more worried about climate change than they were 2 years ago. When they were asked to name the issues that will most influence their vote in the European elections in June, climate came third. So 23% named it as an issue that will influence their vote. When they were asked to rank the issues facing the country, climate came fifth. So there is, and this is not a Friends of the Earth audience. This is Ireland Thinks. It's they have a very established procedure for polling, so it's credible. And then if you look at some particular issues. An absolute majority of people support, when it comes to data centres, they support an indefinite pause on connecting new data centres. That's like 51% support that. 53% of Irish people strongly support continuing to invest twice as much in new public transport as in new roads.
That's me.
But 53%. I mean, that's very positive. 2/3 of people favour targeting grants for electric cars at people in rural areas. So there's lots of positives in that survey, and really interestingly, from a demographic point of view, there's a significant gender gap in some of those questions. And guess who's ahead again?
The men.
The women, of course. So for example, they had a question about reducing our dependence on car journeys, and getting it down to, from 3 out of 4 journeys now being car journeys to 1 out of every 2 in 2030. That sadly does not have majority support. Only 38% of people strongly support halving the number of car journeys by 2030. But there's a significant gender gap there. So men oppose it at a much higher level than women do. So 43% of women oppose it, whereas 52% of men do. So
I don't know what I think about that. What does that mean? Like journeys where? As in abroad or?
No, car journeys. No, so I'll find the exact question. No, it's like the number of journeys being taken by car. So let me find it. Let me find the actual...
I think this kind of links to your point earlier, Ciara, about where has this decision come from? Because Unilever and I suppose to a lesser extent Scotland are kind of like, there's not the ambition there, there's not the hunger there, there's not the will from the people. People don't want this action. But consistently, when people are surveyed, people are still in favour of climate action. And so I think you have to start considering all that stuff in the middle, all the stuff between what the general public wants and what the politicians are doing. And in there's a media that have, to my mind at least, have totally stopped covering climate as much as they would have done in the last couple of years, I would say.
Yeah.
And you have vested interests who, as you said, Anna, like oil companies who have really kind of ramped up their kind of greenwashing and that kind of thing. And then you also have so many bad actors influencing things like, creating fear, like fear was created about the far right about migrants. And we heard we heard the leader of the Green European Party saying that, the next thing that the far right are coming for is the Green New Deal. And there's so many bad faith actors.
Well, they've already scuppered the nature restoration law.
And so I think, when you were asking about not being despondent earlier as well, Ciara, I think the place to not be despondent is the fact that people still want climate action. And there's so much noise between what the people want and what the politicians are doing. But there is still a broad support for climate action, but that is not being kind of conveyed in the public, particularly.
But there is broad support.
Can I just say
but sorry, can I just respond to that? There is broad support, but in the poll there are also some interesting anomalies where, while I support climate action, I do not want to reduce my car journeys. And, for example, one of the most negative responses was to people were asked to what extent they support measures to reduce our dependence on petrol and diesel cars. One of the questions was removal of some parking spaces in cities and town centres, and 48% of people opposed that. So it's kind of like, I'm all for climate action, but don't take away my parking spaces.
Yeah, but where...
And don't make me not use my car.
But where have those opinions... I think we're kind of making the same point, Anna, because where have those opinions come from? What is the narrative that these people are hearing? There was... I don't know if you heard Brian Caulfield on the Pat Kenny show a couple of weeks ago, where he was asked to come on and discuss the latest traffic calming plans for Dublin. And he was essentially he was coming on as an impartial kind of expert and was essentially slated for holding the evidence-based opinions that he held.
Yeah.
So I don't think what we're saying is different. I think there's a huge push to change the narrative and to move people away from progressive kind of evidence-based climate, equitable climate action. And despite that push, there's still a majority in favor of climate action. But I would really
Yeah, I
question.
agree with you, and
Yeah.
I do think the media narrative is they're trying to take all these things away from us, as opposed to we all need to make changes and be open to these changes. So I do agree with you. That's
and
that's
all,
the
and all
media
those
narrative.
all the issues like taking away parking spaces and changing the way we move around, they're still being discussed in a vacuum without considering the overall climate picture and without considering what will happen if we don't take this action.
Right. And like coming back to the kind of the Scotland issue, and they felt that they couldn't do enough. So we are in this poll. 46% of people, 43% of people said that the government is not doing enough fast enough to cut Ireland's pollution. But 25% said the government is doing too much too fast to cut Ireland's pollution. And 32% think the government is doing enough as fast as practical to cut Ireland's pollution. So that's, what's that? How's that add up to? 57% that think we're doing either enough or too much.
Yeah.
Spin that positively for me, somebody.
Well,
quickly,
it's a
please.
lack of information, though. It's a
Yeah.
lack of, like, that's not a, like, I've looked at all the evidence and this is what I think. It's like, I have, where are you getting what?
But Dara, that number has gone up since 2024. So,
Yeah. So that's, yeah.
To be honest, I think it actually relates to what I was saying, which isn't actually the points that we covered here. What I was trying to get at was that I think people don't understand. Okay, Unilever, we can say, okay, umbrella brand, they're not doing, they are greenwashing, but within there probably are people who are trying to actually drive ambitious targets, and they're being like fought against by the shareholders from banks and oil companies. Fine, that's a bit easier to understand. With politics, there's so many different parties, there's so many different lobbyists, there's so many like individual people, and it's really difficult to keep on top, keep abreast, unless you're like really into it. It's really hard to keep abreast of what's happening in there and how the inner workings are influencing us as everyday citizens. And so I think we look at, okay, Fianna Fáil are doing this, Fine Gael are doing that, Social Democrats are doing that. And that's, I have this general broad understanding of what it is. And I'm just going to, I'm going to have this view about these people and that view about these people. And there's no kind of understanding of, when you see somebody do something, one thing maybe that you don't agree with, it's very easy to kind of, I think in the general public, it's very easy for you to cast aside all the kind of good faith you had in them and just be like, now I'm despondent about that. Now I don't believe in that. And become really, what's the word? Like, just cynical. And like, you should be cynical about things, obviously, but to be overly cynical without really a real understanding. Like, what I'm getting at is, so often I'll hear people talk about politicians, right? And I'll go, I don't agree with that. And I don't even understand it. Like, I don't actually understand the reasoning behind certain decisions they've made. And that's not to say, even if I did understand, I would agree with them. But I think people don't fully understand, because it's such a huge topic to get into. And I think that, I suppose, to go back to your point, Dara, the media are letting us down in that they're not really explaining how things work. And obviously we have a certain onus ourselves to educate ourselves on what our local politicians are doing. But I think that feeds into people giving kind of answers like, they don't want, I suppose, for me, I would have actually said, I don't want to reduce my travel. Like, if you asked me off the bat, would I be willing to do that? I probably would have said no, because I'm thinking life is so fucking shit in Ireland. It's so hard. I know it's actually not. But when I'm getting into my place of like, I'm pissed off about the way things are going because I'm looking at the news, that's kind of the mindset I get into. And I suppose that's what I was trying to get at, is that I think people are broadly looking at the whole situation and being let down by the media, because we're not being given the information. Like, there is kind of things that are happening within the political sphere, that people are being influenced by, lobby parties, or there's money being given, exchanged, whatever it is. And I don't feel like that's being explored properly by the media, because it undoubtedly is happening somewhere to some degree. And it's not like people aren't talking, or like people aren't talking about it. But you know what I mean? I feel like there's elements to it that we're not really being taught about, that would have shined a lot of light on what's happening, and would make it easier for people to distinguish who they agree with, who they support, feel, I suppose, more empowered to actually engage in conversations. Does that make any sense, what I just said? If not, you can remove it.
I mean, there's a lot there. So I think one point you're making, if I'm hearing you right, is that in any scenario, there are compromises to be made. So you can't have an absolutist view of either a particular party, or like, so for example, I've never voted for Fine Gael in my life, and I probably never will, but I can still look at certain things and say, okay,
Simon Harris has a lovely tie.
I was trying to think of an example. But, I'm glad Simon Harris apologised to the Stardust people the other day. Or I'm glad he said what he said about Gaza in his speech, So,
yeah.
Or, I can criticise Fianna Fáil, but I'm still glad Micheál Martin went to Rafah the other day and highlighted the things that he's highlighted. So every party, so a lot of environmentalists are really critical of the Green Party, and a lot of left parties are very critical of the Green Party. But to some extent, I look at them and they made compromises to get in and try to get some things done. And yes, a lot of us don't like the compromises that they made. But I mean, ultimately, I suppose Eamon Ryan is the ultimate pragmatist in trying to say, I've got a government I'm working with here. I need to get whatever I can across the line and make progress. So I think there's a lot. I think that's kind of what you're saying too, Ciara, that there's a lot going on that we don't know, and there's a lot of compromises and nuance in everything.
Yeah.
But the other part I would say is that we need to see leadership. People who are running big companies like Unilever, or are running governments or political parties, are in positions of responsibility where they need to demonstrate leadership. And sometimes that is doing things that are saying things that aren't easy and aren't palatable for a lot of people. So, an example of a lack of leadership this week on a different topic is Sinn Féin, who are trying to, say they don't support open borders, and they're trying to play a very dangerous game with immigration issues so that they don't alienate some of their voting base, as opposed to standing up and playing a leadership role where they say, calm down, everybody, it's not a big issue. So I think what you're saying is that we have to understand the mechanisms and how it works. And I don't think everybody does have to understand that. But I think we do need to understand what matters to us and what we want to say to our candidates when we see them on the doorstep. I think that's important. And come back to the media point, the Irish media love nothing better than a row between politicians. And that's how it's set up. Let's have a row, let's have some conflict. And that does not help people in the country really understand the issues at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that point about leadership is really, really important as well, Anna, is that we should expect that politicians should be taking proportionate climate action.
Absolutely.
It's the crisis, it's the crisis of our time. And it's not we shouldn't have to, this thing of obviously people need to get across the issues that are important to them. But this is so big that that, as you say, they should be showing leadership regardless, right. And leadership is so important in the general public feeling, being okay with taking climate action. Why would I take climate action if the more rich and powerful people above me aren't doing anything?
Exactly. And to Ciara's point though as well, I mean, there is a justice issue in it too, where if I'm worrying about paying my rent, or I can't find somewhere that I can afford to rent, or, I'm still living at home with my parents when I'm 30, it's like those...
33.
Yeah, 33.
You kicked your parents out, Ciara, it's fine.
Or in some cases, I still have a 33-year-old living at home with me. But, those issues are it's those are the priorities for people that they're worrying about. And like Lynn Boylan, who's in Sinn Féin and running for MEP, she got criticised this week because she said that climate action is not a priority for a lot of Sinn Féin voters. And she was kind of misquoted. Well, she was quoted out of context on that, because what she was actually saying was there are justice issues in this. And if people can't make ends meet, if they're not feeding their kids properly, if they can't afford school books, then of course they're not going to be thinking about bigger long-term issues. They're trying to get through day to day.
Yeah.
Which I think is a fair point.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing is like that you hope that people can see that those things are connected.
Right.
You know, that like the cost of living crisis that was, kind of triggered by an increase in fuel prices.
Right.
All connected, and that hopefully people can make those links.
But just to finish up on that Friends of the Earth poll with a positive statement, let's just remember that there are some nuances in it, but an absolute majority of people are concerned still about climate change and want climate action. So let's keep that in mind. That's positive.
Yeah, and we will move on to our good news story. This is a great news story, I would say, that California hit a new renewables record after exceeding 100% of grid demand with renewable energy sources for 30 out of the past 38 days. So for 30 of the last 38 days, California, which I think you've told me a few times, Anna, is the 5th biggest economy in the world.
It is.
30 out of 38 days, they produced more renewable energy than was needed for the whole state, which is incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and once you have battery storage, that's phenomenal. And actually, there's another story related to that, where there's a massive renewable battery plant that's been built just across the border from California in Nevada, and it looks like they can recover something like, I want to say 90% of the minerals that are in batteries. So that's a game changer as well, because we hear a lot about the impact of batteries for electric cars on the environment and mining and so on. But if you can reuse 95% of it, happy days.
Yeah. And linked to that, a story that maybe we missed it in our last season, but just that, California, it's not isolated. Portugal in November, for 149 consecutive hours, produced more renewable energy than the entire country needed. So they did 6 days totally on renewables. So
I think here in Ireland we had our highest, I don't know if it was our highest March or our highest month of wind energy as well, where was it around 43% of the needs. So, we're making progress. That's what we have to keep looking at. Clean energy is there. We're making progress. Solar is now the cheapest form of energy in the world, so we need to get on it.
And the cheapest form ever.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that is sorry, not to keep harking back to the people pulling out their pledges and stuff, but it's just literally a lack of will. There's technology there. And then the thing that's really frustrating me is like the amount of money and thought and like ingenuity that goes into, for example, the arms industry. And if you compare that to what we're not seeing in climate action, but these stories about the renewables really, really show us like
that it can be done.
Exactly.
And it can be done quickly, but we need to get on with it.
Yeah. Another good news story is that Europe has voted to leave the ECT.
Yep. The
Anna,
Energy Charter Treaty.
So,
I was expecting that, Ciara. That's why it's got Energy Charter Treaty. We talked about this last year, I think, but it's a treaty. It's just the most shocking treaty ever, where countries agreed that if energy companies lose money because of a change in policy, that the company has to pay, or the country has to pay the company compensation.
Oh my goodness.
It's the most bizarre. So energy investors are protected. So again, thinking about, Ciara, what you were saying earlier about the system being stacked against climate action, energy investors are protected against changes in policy that could cost them money. So luckily, thankfully, MEPs have now voted to leave the treaty and say to hell with that. We're not doing that anymore. So that
Yeah.
is really positive.
Yeah, which is good to see. From an Irish perspective, some countries left it themselves.
Yep.
France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, among others, left it themselves. Ireland didn't. We didn't show that leadership. We were kind of like, we'll wait and see. But
everyone else does.
the European
Yep.
Union has left that now, which
Yep.
is
So
great.
that's positive.
Then before we go, any actions that we have?
Action. So, Ciara, this is one you should like because it is about your elections and climate pledges. So, we have local elections coming up here in June, as well as the European elections. But my friends at Not Here, Not Anywhere are launching a climate pledge for the local elections. So, they are encouraging candidates to step up to be climate leaders instead of climate culprits. So on Wednesday, May 1st, which is next Wednesday, outside the Dáil at 1 o'clock, they are having a launch of that campaign. So everybody's welcome. If you can make it, come along. If you can't, check out the website because there's ideas there and to make it very easy for you to contact your local candidates and tell them what you want them to do. So they're asking candidates to sign a pledge or to commit one way or the other. And if they don't sign the pledge, they're climate culprits. And you might think councillors can't do very much, but at a local level, they can. And in particular, they're looking at data centres, for example, and LNG coming into Ireland. So councillors can do quite a bit. Keep that in mind when you're voting for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice
That's an action.
To follow on from that, I don't know if it's quite clear that I have been tapped out of the climate sphere for the last few months, and I'm trying to get back into the headspace where I'm able to talk succinctly or in at least some form of informed way. But I'm struggling with it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start jotting down like questions that I have about things that are happening in the world and have them prepped for when politicians turn up at the door so that I can at least ramble some sort of question at them.
I want to be there for that. That sounds good.
I honestly wonder at this stage, should you just ask candidates, do you know what climate change is? And if they say yeah, be like, okay, what is it?
Okay, that'll go on my
and
question.
see what they say. Because
as they back away.
Yeah, no, because a lot of them haven't a clue, I'd say.
Yeah.
But anyways, there's also an urgent petition about the Global Plastics Treaty.
Plastic has been a theme for us this week. So as part of Earth Week, there's global plastics treaty negotiations have begun, and activists are calling for a treaty to reduce plastic production, protect the environment, despite what Unilever is trying to do. So there is a petition that you can add your name to for that, and we will share a link in the show notes. And just a trivia question, guys. What percentage of the plastic we discard every day is recycled or incinerated in waste-to-energy facilities? Anyone? What percentage of our plastic do you think is recycled?
It's low. I'd say 25%.
I will say 17.
And I will tell you it's 9.
Oh, for Jesus' sake.
Yay, I win. I was closest.
So I
The
suppose,
glory is mine.
I guess that is one, we haven't talked about that new bottle and can recycling scheme. But that's a really, I know there's problems with it, but the stuff that goes through that is recycled in the most efficient way possible. So that's trying to address that target somewhat.
Yeah, I didn't realise until that came in, until very recently, that most of the plastic most of what we put in our recycling bins is going to the incinerator to be burned.
Yeah.
Oh, Anna, how did you not know that? Thought you were into this climate change crap.
We were doing so well
thanks,
with finishing on a positive note.
I've got a positive note. I would like to people. I genuinely was having one of the worst weeks I've had in a very long time this week. And then I just made a conscious decision I was going to give up the ghost and stop feeding into the hard times. And I went for a walk, and I honest to God cannot express how much of a difference it meant to my life. I was getting ready to commit myself to rehab this week. I was in such a state. But thank God the sunshine is back and the air is nice and fresh and the birds are singing. So if anyone's having a hard time, get out for a walk. It's obviously not going to solve the problem, but it'll improve the
I
Help you feel better.
absolutely 100% agree. I got a text from my sister to say that they heard the cuckoo at home there
Woohoo.
during the week. The swallows are back. The San Martins are back. The swifts will be back soon. The birds,
Pheasants.
the birds are all singing. It's it's a great time to just get out and connect with nature. Get up early, listen to the dawn chorus in the next couple of weeks. It's absolutely brilliant for the soul.
Yeah.
That is it for this week. We're actually taking a very early mid-season break. We're not going to be around for the next couple of weeks, but we will be back on around the 16th of May. So until then,
That's why I've given you an extra long episode this week to keep you going.
Yeah.
so until then, enjoy the nature. Anna and Ciara, thanks a million.
Cuckoo.
Woo.
Cuckoo.
And to close out, we're going to listen to an amazing poem written by Dr. Elaine McGough that was shared on Antashka's Instagram page for Earth Day. So here we go. Enjoy.
Dear Earth, do you remember how we used to be? Free range, heart happy, wild as the day was long. I knew you then, your nettle sharp, shin deep, blossom bright wonder. Now you are commodified and politicized, diminished and tidy. And I am preoccupied with the battle for you, the science of you, the grim reality of the rapidly diminishing splendor of you. But there are days where I still need your wild, untamed self, and I immerse myself in your rivers, fling myself in your seas, merge my fragile human heart in the implacable blue archeries of your lands. And I am frozen, but whole, wildly alive and present. You gift me resilience for my autumn, resolve for my winter, hope for my spring, and pure joy for my summer. I sometimes wish I was blind to the everyday diminution of life that many don't see. The absence where species used to thrive, the silence where once life thrummed. But I do see. I will not look away, and there are ever more like me. We may feel powerless, but we are many. Deep in our veins, the earth song is calling, and together we shall rise like the irrepressible tide. For you, Chroma Cree, Elaine.